of course, when we marshal the will, so to speak, when we use our thinking, our intuition, our body, again, it is cause and effect, isn't it? You know, and that is the world that's living, or we could possibly say that that is being caught up in the world, caught up in the mind, or caught up in do-ership, these things. And of course, it is in the absence of that we find rest or reality. When we inquire into our natural state, we come to see that it is non-causal. It is not subject to cause and condition, is it? When that gnosis awakens, we associate that to our own being. It's a beingness, non-causal, non-cause and effect. In that sense, you're free of the world. You're not of the world. And there is a way of examining that. There's a way of knowing that when you realize that this knowing, although knowing of the cause and effect of the world, so to speak, the duality, the knowing itself is transcendent of it, because it relates from itself. It associates to the beingness of what it is. Okay, so what does that mean? The simplest way of describing that is, upon awakening, upon the knowing, you can know a feeling in the body, you can know subsequently a pattern that may arise in relation to that. And you'll be able to distinguish the knowing from the forms that are happening, so to speak, what's happening to you in your person. And you'll know that the knowing doesn't relate from the person. Does that make sense? It only relates to itself because it's of itself. It's not of the world, so it's knowing of the world. But it lives in relation to what it is, the as-is nature of being, so to speak. And this is fascinating. This is intriguing when one begins to inquire into their natural state. The knowing is permanent, it's abiding, meaning it associates to its true location, which is not here. But of course, in ignorance, we attach to here. We attach to the mind. And through the mind, we become the thing itself. We become the thought I. And then from the thought I, how everything associates to that thought I. So if we get an emotion, it's I have an emotion. That I'm feeling emotional. So where does it come from? Oh, I have a feeling. And so by identifying with the mind becomes the thing itself. It becomes the I, it becomes the body. And everything in your personal experience then begins to associate to that thing itself, this thought, you see. And this brings us to your question, being in the world, but not of it. What happens when we allow everything to associate to the idea we have of ourselves is we get caught in the world. We are stuck in the world, you see, in the realm of cause and effect. And through cause and effect, associating to the thought I, we create a logic, what we call a narrative, what we call a story. We create this narrative that's negotiable between the environmental factor, our personal feeling factor, and the I itself. See? And this logic, one's story, one's personal orientation, has everything associated to that thought, I. Here, we are lost in the world. Here, we are the world. We are the mind. We are the cause and condition. And the problem is not the logic, the story. That's not the problem. That's a justification. It doesn't matter what's happened to you. That's just cause and effect. The problem is I, that you were shocked into. This thought that claims all experience. See, this is being caught up in the world and not understanding how not to be of it. And it's fascinating. And there's a reason that happens. Of course, through ignorance, through identification with the mind. The mind itself is a thing, is a form. It's known. So it's self-evident. But when you identify with the mind becomes you. It's no longer self-evident of consciousness. It's self-evident of the thing itself, the thought I. And then one meditates, or one begins to deepen in the knowing. You come to examine the thought itself, I. You come to examine the emotion itself. Does this belong to I? Does the body sensation belong to I? Who is this I? But in this inquiry, something can open up, something indefinable, something prior cause and effect, something immutable, just the knowing. And it's upon this examination of knowing, without any personal inference coming from I, one meditates. And one comes to see that the knowing of the thought can be distinguished from the thought itself. And that knowing, in its purest, formless seeing, is without object. This is where a lot of people stumble, because when you live in the realm of cause and effect, you live in the realm of subject I with the objective to think, right? that this is the habit of being stuck in this world, right? So I've forgotten where I was. So there's this, that's it. So there's this habit of activity, of seeking, of personal orientation. And then suddenly, it's like it opens. It's like this portal, because it is a portal between the unseen and the seen. There's a portal, opens. And it opens through this kind of inquiry. Who am I? What is this seeing now? What is this? When you can distinguish that from the thought of you, for instance, the thought of you. What is this backdrop? What is this knowing? And you can enter into inquiry where there's nothing you can do. There's nothing you can use. There's nothing. You enter into what the mystics would call the unknowing, which of course is a knowing. It's a paradox, isn't it? But here you distinguish your knowing from what you know. And what you know is that old habit of cause and effect. The old habit of claiming your emotion, your body feeling, your mind, the thought for yourself. And suddenly you are this knowing that can know this, that can know this, and it's doing nothing. It's just seeing, it's just present. And we've entered into our unknowing, which is not of this world. The unknowing is not of this world. And the unknowing is this knowing, this silent, prior verbal, prior acquisition of language. Just sees, it just opens up, sees, for no one. See? And of course, it is not of this world. And the reason it is not of this world is because it doesn't relate from this world. That is the deepest meaning of that. The deepest meaning of not of this world is a knowing, your witness, your observation, no longer relating from this or motivated by this. All of this is cause and effect. And that is the custom of the false self, the custom of self-obsession, of I, is when it feels bad, it wants to feel good. When things are out of balance, it wants to balance. It's all about cause and effect. And this is the custom of your identity claiming all experience. But this knowing, suddenly distinguishing itself from your forms, sees it doesn't relate from these forms. It's knowing of these forms. Very, very different. As simple as that may sound, this is, upon investigation, a very profound moment, an incredibly profound moment, when suddenly this knowing of itself is permanent, is immutable, is indivisible. It doesn't split, it doesn't, your knowing of your forms or the habit of you doesn't separate from itself to know itself. It's just knowing. This is very counterintuitive to the I thought, because the I thought needs the object thought to think. This is, in the world of cause and effect, we pay too much attention to thinking, the activity of thinking. You'll have a thought for an emotion, and a thought for a sensation in the body, a thought for this, a thought for that, and it all comes back to the I thought. All of it. And you live by cause and effect. But not so with knowing. The knowing of this doesn't relate from this, but it is the experience of this. So this is where the old experiencer, I, activity, all of that experience is now given back to your knowing being the experience. This is the laying down of one's life to receive eternal life. And it feels dysfunctional. At first, when you awaken to what is not of this world, you'll then become dysfunctional to this world. Everything you've learned, everything you've claimed, everything you've taken for yourself is now being given back to what you are as a being, as consciousness. But it's good enough. It's good enough to know, knowing. Because in that, you'll realize how much experience you've given to this illusionary thought, you see, this activity, this self-obsession, whatever you want to call it. And you'll be happy. Be happy that you know something much deeper than you could ever know, so to speak, than you could ever know. From the old activity of owning your emotions, owning your body, owning your responses to the environment, owning your responses to your instinct. You'll give all that away to keep what is not of this world, you see. And then it's then that you begin to learn how to be in the world, but not be of it. Already you're not of the world. As soon as knowing awakens, you're not of the world. Not by any stretch. But to learn to not be of the world, but to be in it, to be in the world but not of it, is something you learn gradually. And it starts with that portal opening up, that indefinable portal that the mind cannot grasp, that the do-ership cannot claim. This very present moment. In your do-ership, in your I, all you can claim is yourself. That's all. This is our suffering. This is our self-obsession. This is our self-will direction gone astray. Possessing the body and its instinct. Where we've learned to nurture ourselves, we've ended up consuming ourselves. But not so now, not with this portal of knowing awakening. And yet this portal of knowing, this grace of Christ consciousness knows nothing. But it knows it's not of this world. That's the one thing it knows, it's not of this world. It's knowing of the world. Upon further investigation, not of this world, distinguishing your knowing from that activity of your mind claiming all experience. You just begin to accept it all. You just begin to accept yourself as you are right now. It doesn't matter what feeling you get, what emotions come up. You're now giving it all away to your being. Even the old habit of wanting to claim it in the mind, where a person feels they're getting caught up in their ego again, even that is given back to your being. So what is not of this world? Consciousness being the experience, knowing being what sees. And then you have a lovely dysfunctional time. Old tendencies coming up, pulling you out of your knowing, taking you into your mind. And you have a lovely time of it. But because your knowing is awakened and can be distinguished, you'll just be happy with that. And you'll give everything to that. But it's when this knowing awakens, when this, what is not of this world awakens, you begin to understand the deeper mysteries that can only be given to you from this surrendered vantage point of reality. This vantage point of grace, this vantage point of deeper being. As you contemplate yourself, you come to see that you are the self. You come to see that this knowing that can distinguish itself from the form that arises as I. You come to see that this knowing itself can contemplate itself. From its non-location, you come to see it is the self. And it's very different from the old thought that claimed you, or the old sense self that took everything, consumed you, every feeling, every emotion, every analysis. It's beautiful. It knows it is the self. It becomes stronger, bit by bit, more established. And you get to a point where what is not of this world is what makes this world real, is what gives this world meaning. No one. It is just meaning without any acquired meaning. And again, this really feels counterintuitive to the old custom of gathering meaning. You know how we gather meaning through life. You know how we gather information and it becomes, it so resonates with a reality that it has us go for it. It has us walk towards it, crawl towards it sometimes. But this open reality, you don't need to do any of that. You just know it. For itself. Upon further inquiry, you just come to see that whatever you feel in the body, whatever emotion arises, it is seen. And as one remains the seeing, one remains not of this world to what is in the world. It's such a paradox, but it's a beautiful paradox. It's one that can't be understood by the mind, but you in your being, you as what you are meant to be, what you first are. You just feel whatever you feel. You see emotion arise out of it. And you realize that where you got caught up in the world, you gave everything to the thought of you. But now that you're awake, now that you're this perfect, abiding knowing and seeing, just by seeing it, what you see is given to it. And this goes against the old custom of understanding it, working it out, coordinating it. There's no coordination anymore, which really goes against the old custom. Now it becomes more fluid, it becomes more intuitive. As it says in the big book, we intuitively know how to deal with things that used to baffle us. That's what they're talking about. This. What awakens is your knowing, and your knowing is not of this world, but it gives meaning to this world. So a feeling comes up, an emotion comes up, and it's seen, and in that seeing, it becomes self-evident. And it may not match your knowing. It may have a tendency to lean you back into the mind for you to claim it mentally, or through your idea, through your narrative, whatever. But you can stay in your being. You can stay and see how, when you're not of this world, it has the most profound effect on your forms. Although it's counterintuitive, there's no one reacting, there's no one doing something. This knowing that is not of this world is so powerful. When you look at something, when you see something in your body, and it manifests and it rises up through the other, you see it, you see how in your body you'll feel something, and the movement will move up into a feeling, into a thought. And there is your personal direction, your personal self-consciousness over your body. But when you remain in your knowing and your seeing, it moves up naturally, and it's not claimed by your mind. It just moves all the way up, and it remains self-evident of what is knowing. It's being seen. So there's your natural intelligence of the body, the natural intelligence of the mind, these functions, these vehicles of expression. But what gives it meaning is your seeing, and you're completely surrendered to what you know. You come to see that what you know that is not of this world is the only real thing there is. The only real thing. And that when it's seen, it naturally associates self-evidently to what is seeing. The seer and the seen become one. See? It's one intuitive movement. Oneness given meaning to form. You begin to live in the world, but not of it. What you give the world is the deepest meaning from your heart, the deepest meaning from what you are. And you never judge it. And giving the world that meaning, the more you starts to associate to your being, to your knowing. And that knowing that is meaning itself, although it gives meaning to your body mind, its ultimate meaning is not here. It's not here. There are deeper levels of being. that are not here. Fundamentally, the absolute level. We come to see that the root ground of being, to all appearance, is Christ, the Christ consciousness. But we come to see how Christ consciousness has its abode in God, in the absolute, the second ground of being. So it gives our Christ-like nature a hidden ground of being that only your being can understand. And that being, that Christ nature, knows it is of God and is God. The science of which is what is not of here is of the absolute. It's the first expression of the absolute. It's your being, it's your knowing that is unknowing. It's beautiful. Sometimes not being in the world, not being of it. Sometimes it's like the portal closes and your knowing is the size of a mustard seed, the size of a tiny, tiny thing. And the world around you can be like stormy skies and stormy seas, billowing winds. And it seems so big. It seems that the raging narrative that the mind claims, maintaining its I, seems so strong. And it gets bigger and your knowing gets smaller. And that's okay, because you can still not be of the world, but be in it. You can be the tiniest seed compared to such gross sensation. But that knowing will permeate, will move through, will, via its unconditional resistance, non-resistance, rein those horses in. Rein every single thing in. Gently. Until that tiny bit of knowing has claimed everything in you. Everything. Sometimes a rein will slip out of your hands. You may be confused, but your rallying point of sanity will just come back to your knowing, to what is not here, what is not of this world, until that rein is handed back to you. Sometimes they'll all be ripped out of your hand, and your world is just a mess. But the knowing can still maintain its permanence, can still maintain its seeing, and it will wait. Then it's given back to you. All experience of what is here, who you are, you, your self-consciousness, will gradually be given back to what you know, to what is not of this world. Everything you claimed for yourself will be given back to the self, given back to what you are. So, being in the world and not of it is the ultimate endurance of life. To be what you are in who you are. But it's not like the cause and effect thing where the challenge is a huge goal and you've got to do it and you've got to... It's not like that. Just know. And allow knowing to be the experience. Give all experience back. So that you're not here and you are here. What is here is in relation to not here. And it really doesn't matter if your mind is strong or unruly. If there really is, you come to see this, that even if the mind is unruly and it's given to self-centeredness, given to self-possession, even that's okay. As long as you know a deeper truth, that becomes your anchor. That becomes your rock. It doesn't matter what is happening in you. Because the main focus now is, what is it you're being? And everything in you can go into all sorts of patterns and it may not match you. But it doesn't stop you from being what you know. So the whole question on being here and not here is about becoming what you're truly meant to be. And allowing everything into that, allowing everything to associate to that. But it's difficult because we spent our whole life rebelling, being ignorant, learning nurture, but only learning nurture for oneself. We never transitioned so that nurture would fall away and be given to a deeper nurture of being. See?